It's very early in the season, so to some of us who have been watching this sport for a while, Japan being the third venue we visit might be a little surprise. But this is a new spot in the calendar for Suzuka, and since this is typically a place to bring upgrades, special liveries and helmet designs, no wonder we got most of that this year as well. With a month-long F1 break just ahead of this race, it is a perfect time for some major news or a team falling apart. And funnily enough, that also happened to some degree, thanks to none other than Jonathan Whitley. Guess I got some stories to cover. So, what happened? Hey everyone, this is Tank, the fashion guru and style analyst. Come with me as we're about to slay our way through the paddock. We've got 3 creations to cover. First of all, Mercedes, the German outfit partnering with Japanese clothing brand Y3 to bring Lance Stroll's dream team one-man Wolfpack into reality. I gotta say, I'm sold on the clothing design, however it barely graced the car's front wing, so I can't really praise it. Next off, the Racing Bulls. They splashed their 2026 Challenger with red hand-paint-like design that absolutely slaps and highlights how great of a livery this is. Paired with team kits that share the resemblance, I believe it is a well put together look for the team. Hopefully that brings them luck in this Grand Prix. And lastly, most definitely the best of the bunch, Haas. For a team that had some stinkers in the past, bringing out a Godzilla in Toyota colors towering over the competition is a breath of fresh air. I love this design, 10 out of 10. One more for the news. Jonathan Whitley steps down from his team principal role for Ollie and looks for a new job. And guess what? A spot just freed at Aston Martin. All jokes aside, Whitley's services being poached to Aston Martin are very likely, but the effects of that remain to be seen to this day, which is quite a fucking while because I'm 2 months late. Sorry about that. A new standard practice for the practice sessions is to start them with a virtual safety car. The race organizers get to check if all the systems work correctly, and whoever ventures out on the track may also verify if their fancy VSC mode slows the car down as expected. Gabriel Bortoleto seemingly forgetting about it as he decides to have an actual issue at the very end of the pit lane. In the time he reignited the car, few heads were scratching if overtaking him was even legal. Thankfully, no intervention was required, which cannot be said for Aston Martin. Jack Crawford had to step in for Fernando Alonso, who was rather very busy on Friday as he witnessed the birth of his son Leonard. Huge congratulations to the Alonsos and all the best wishes for the future. But back to Jack. The American becomes the first reserve driver to claim an FP1 session this season, and quite a venue to do it on. Suzuka is known for its difficult layout and proved quite a challenge for Crawford as well, but not as much as the car itself, which only granted him 11 laps during his 60-minute stand-in, the least of any driver. I'm not really surprised, because out of all the years, this is not the one to be driving an Aston Martin, but he wasn't the only one suffering, as the changing wind conditions caught many others off guard. Lando Norris, George Russell, Liam Lawson, Arvid Lindblad, Charles Leclerc, and Max Verstappen, all going wide at Spoon where the wind has picked up the most, causing a sudden snap and virtually no control over the car. Still, all of them avoided going into the wall. Alex Albon breaking that streak, going way overboard in Degna 2, Thai driver carrying too much speed and clipping the wall at the exit of the corner. This, however, was not even the most problematic moment for him this session, as just 20 minutes later he got locked out of an entry to the chicane by Sergio Perez and crashed into the side of Cadillac. The Mexican on the long run didn't necessarily need to give him a lot of space, but there is just no need for crashes in FP1. You can say that Checo was just not observant enough this session, as this wasn't the only time he didn't notice someone in his mirrors. Earlier on, he blocked George Russell on a fast lap in a way that didn't really seem like he knew other drivers around the track with him. At the dying moments of the session, we got our first taste of racing around the Suzuka circuit as Charles Leclerc, Pierre Gasly and Oscar Piastri went 3 wide into turn 1, miraculously not ending in a crash. Great job to the 3 of them. FP1 ended with Mercedes 1-2, McLaren 3-4 and Ferrari 5-6, with Russell, Norris and Leclerc winning their teammate battles. While the FP1 was tricky because of the weather condition, FP2 was more of a technical problem session. Cars deciding to start the weekend a bit earlier, clocking out as soon as possible on Friday. Within the first few minutes, we lost Arvid Lindblad, Racing Bull's driver completing only about 3/4 of a lap before receiving a frightening radio message informing him that his mechanics don't really understand the issue. Sadly, that meant that he had to sit out the rest of the session. He had some mates who could cheer him up, like Lando Norris, Gabriel Bortoleto and Sergio Perez, who all were also stuck in their garages with major issues. Their teams did an outstanding job to get them all on track in the second part of the hour. Huge props to the drivers as well for making the most out of what they got. This evidenced especially clearly by the current world champ, who in his pursuit of the absolute limit managed to smoke his tires and venture outside of the track. Albon gave Williams a little scare that he's gonna be the next to follow the issue train, however after stopping on track with a non-functional throttle, he managed to reboot the car and start again. Key highlight belonging to Charles Leclerc as he drifted that Ferrari left and right, with his maneuvers at the S's looking particularly amazing. McLaren of Oscar Piastri topped the session, albeit just a tenth faster than Antonelli and Russell. Lando's streak of bad luck and issues with the car continued in FP3, hydraulic issue the day before, and now the ERS. The Brit had very little time to play with his machine, but we can argue that there wasn't much happening for everyone in FP3, as for the first few minutes it was just Alpines on the track, shortly followed by Ferrari of Lewis Hamilton and 2 Cadillacs. And while we're at Cadillac, let's focus for a moment on Sergio Perez, who locked up a serious lot and skipped both the actual and the reserve chicane at the end of the lap. Checo rather harsh on his floor as he went through the gravel to get back on the track. FP3 seemed like the day for the Audi squad, as both Nico Hülkenberg and Gabriel Bortoleto constantly bothered the top 10 and even top 5 on occasion. Impressive showcase ahead of qualifying. But not really a good day for Ollie Behrman, as the Brit didn't really set a great time, finished P15, 2/10 behind his teammate and added a spin out of a spoon curve. To his credit, an incredible save kept him out of the wall and minimized the damage to nothing but a bunch of flat-spotted tires. Liam Lawson meanwhile did get a little bit of damage, though his only being a PR catastrophe as he blamed Behrman for existing at the same track as him. The Kiwi also went out in the spoon curve, but somehow he was, I don't know, distracted by Oliver? Who knows, but he did not want to take the responsibility. Japanese practice ended with Antonelli first, Russell second and the closest competitor for Mercedes being the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc, some 8.5 behind. Main takeaway from training sesh in Suzuka is definitely practice start attendance. To give you more context, at the end of each practice session, the drivers may get to a grid slot and attempt a race start to prepare themselves for Sunday. In the past, this was done by a few cars at most. This season, everyone and their mother gets to a grid slot searching for more experience on the starts. First tours in quali put Antonelli at the top ahead of Leclerc and Piastri, with Aston Martins, Williamses and Cadillacs at the drop zone. So, nothing out of ordinary, at least if you don't count George Russell, not only out of the top 3, but also out-qualified by Nico Hülkenberg, who put it into P5. 1/1000 of a second ahead of his teammate as well. As we moved closer to the dying seconds of Q1, the top 3 returned to having both Mercedes within it, but this time it was Leclerc at the top. Things at the back were much more interesting. Qualis in Australia and China had me expecting to see the same 3 teams get eliminated. With no technical issues and just pure pace, both Williamses managed to break that rule and out-qualify none other than Oliver Behrman. It was less of an incredible achievement for Carlos and Alex and more of a disappointing showing for Ollie, qualifying P18, really compromising his weekend as he got eliminated alongside Alex Albon, both Cadillacs and Aston Martins. Q2 entered into a rather familiar territory as Max Verstappen again left a lot of time on the table, allowing other drivers to knock him out. I say he left the time on the table as Isaac Hadjar got the better of him in both their first and second runs. Pierre Gasly pushed Max closer to the drop zone, then Hülkenberg and Ocon missed out, but our only rookie this season, Arvid Lindblad, threw the 4-time world champion out of Q3, granting us yet another shocker. Verstappen had to wave goodbye to the rest of the proceedings, alongside Ocon, Hülkenberg, Lawson, Colapinto and Sainz, making it 6 different teams eliminated this session. Great performance that needs highlighting is again a rapid pace by Bortoleto and Gasly, who kept it very close to Lando Norris. Then it was Q3, and let me tell you, sometimes the biggest surprises are when nothing happens. After the first runs, it was Mercedes ahead of McLarens and Ferraris, with Antonelli, Piastri and Leclerc being the lead cars in teammate battles. It was Antonelli's pole to lose, and while he didn't improve on his second run, no one did, apart from Leclerc and Gasly of course. The Frenchman improved to 7th, slotting behind the big 3 teams, and Leclerc pipped Norris to get to 4th. Part of it being just screwed up laps, just like in the example of George Russell, who had a serious chance to get ahead, only to fumble it in the chicane at the end of the lap. These things happen, but it's a costly mistake for George, as Antonelli gets back-to-back poles. Should he convert it into another victory, it would make a huge statement for the fate of this championship. One thing for certain, the start did not make that easy for him. The young Italian dropping to 6th instantly, but you gotta give credit where credit is due. It was a phenomenal start for both McLarens and Charles Leclerc, the 3 of them leaving both Mercedes drivers behind, with Piastri stealing the lead and Charles becoming a meat in a McLaren sandwich. Poor getaway was also a thing for both Ollies, as we saw them tumble down the order, with Hülkenberg dropping all the way to 19th. It wasn't long before the big names started making moves though, Antonelli jumping Hamilton while his teammate was already 2nd, with Norris and Leclerc not being able to answer the pure German engine power. The next car on George's way was Oscar Piastri, but the Aussie wasn't about giving up the lead of the race. Especially that it was the first Grand Prix Piastri managed to start, so while the Brit got close and even ahead of him for a short moment, Oscar took back the lead in a very quick fashion, just like Verstappen and Ocon when they started making their way through the field. Red Bull and Haas in a tandem, first dealing with Hajar and then Lindblad, setting Esteban on course for first points this season. Slightly ahead, we've had a second coming of the McLaren-Mercedes duel, though this time it was Antonelli and Norris scrubbing for 4th. That gave Kimi a chance to follow Leclerc and me a chance to take a look at Nico Hülkenberg, who finally, after 11 laps of being 0.5 seconds behind Sainz, managed to overtake him for 16th. Frustrating, but probably not as much as being overtaken with no battery left and having to watch as your rival just drives away, which happened to both Leclerc and Antonelli at some point during their duel. Ultimately, Leclerc kept his 3rd spot. With neither Mercedes making a real challenge on the car ahead, we were on track for a new winner, Piastri keeping a solid pace that kept him 2 seconds ahead of Russell. With track position held tight, he was very unlikely to be overtaken by anyone in the near future. With that in mind, McLaren had to engineer something different for Norris, Lando pitting early to potentially gain some time on his brand new hard tires. Same idea applied for Lindblad, Vicard deciding to blink first and get him out of the duel with Hajar that was ongoing for a few laps. Only there was a little problem. Racing Bulls, while still sharing a lot with Red Bull, couldn't match their tire change speed. The rookie lost track position and was now closer to being overtaken by Franco Colapinto rather than fighting Isaac again. At this moment, McLaren and Mercedes strategies collided. Early pit stop for Papayas meant that both Russell and Antonelli had to extend their stints, hoping Piastri won't be fast enough to hold on to the net lead and Lando and Charles won't undercut. Not an ideal scenario, and with Norris lighting up the timing sheets, it became clear that the sooner Mercedes pits, the better. The lead car being Russell got the priority, decision that would be extremely disastrous for the Brit. And while this had colossal implications on this race and the championship as a whole, let's focus for a moment on what happened and why is it so important. It is lap 22. Ollie Berman has been glued to the back of Franco Colapinto for the last 2 laps. Franco has been really pushing to fend off the bear attack, which insanely drained his battery. Should he continue, he'd have nothing left for the long straight and 130R, basically giving up the position. His best option? Slow down, harvest the energy and prepare his own attack on the long straight or the start-finish straight. Oliver meanwhile has all of the battery at his disposal. He attacks. Combine the two and we have a difference of over 50 km per hour between the cars. This proportion bigger than anything we have seen in the last decade. Berman is taken off guard, because it looks like Franco has an issue. Colapinto puts the littlest of defensive squeezes, but paired with everything I just told you, it forces Ollie to take avoiding action. And with not much room, he goes into the grass. He finds no grip and no chance to slow down. He's basically a passenger at this point. With the force of over 50 Gs, he slams into the wall. But was he at fault, or was it caused by Franco? I'd argue none of the above. The cars were not meant to have this much of a difference in closing speed. That's something the drivers warned about as early as pre-season testing, Carlos Sainz being the most vocal and most furious out of all of them. To me, this was an egregious accident that should have never happened, and never would if superclipping wasn't a thing. Disaster. Shit show. Call it however you want, but it's just sad to see. Maybe this accident will change something, so we can prevent it from happening again in the future. With Berman out and safety car deployed, Antonelli, Hamilton, Gasly and both Astons turned out lucky and benefited from a shorter pit stop. Kimi finding the Willy Wonka's golden ticket inside of his chocolate bar. He would be the one to pit next lap, so should Colapinto hang on to more battery power and get overtaken on the straight, the Italian would be nowhere near the lead. Nonetheless, Antonelli aced the safety car restart, unlike his teammate. Russell caught instantly by Hamilton, and now the top three were Kimi, Oscar and Lewis. It wasn't over for George, as his Mercedes lagged pretty hard, and before he managed to get the task manager opened, Leclerc was already ahead. Slightly behind, the only thing stopping Max Verstappen from joining the frontrunners was Pierre Gasly, who had invented the widest Alpine known to humanity and defended against all the Dutchmen could have thrown at him. But back in front, it was time for another Ferrari duel. In 2026, they are delivering some of the best nail-biters I have seen in years. Credit to Frédéric Vasseur for letting them race each other. Charles declared a winner in that battle, and a lap later George followed him, dropping the 7-time world champion to 5th. The fall of Lewis was not done, however, as Norris was also hungry for more points. We've had 3 important fights going on at the same time. Leclerc and Russell fought for the last step of the podium, Norris and Hamilton for 5th, and the previously mentioned Gasly-Verstappen scrap for 7th was far from over. 4 laps of pass and repass later, it was Leclerc completing the podium behind Antonelli and Piastri, Norris winning the Battle of Britain, and Gasly somehow kept Max at bay. Lawson and Ocon completed the points. It was just a race ago that Kimi Antonelli made history, becoming the youngest to take pole and second youngest to win a race. Now he followed it with an even more ridiculous stat of becoming the youngest championship leader in history, as well as the first Italian to win consecutive races since Alberto Ascari in 1953. Italy, rejoice! Your boy is truly in the big leagues now. Aye. The race itself was fun, but there are a lot of small implications that I kinda wanna talk about in the form of top 5 and bottom 5 performers. It may sound unfair, because some of the bottom performers are here based purely on bad luck, but you know, sometimes it defines if the weekend was good or not. I'm not about kicking someone while they are already laying down, but Sergio Perez did not really impress this weekend. And I don't mean that from the result-driven perspective. Through most of the 3 days he was on par with Valtteri, who I can compare him to, even slightly better at times. But he was completely unaware of his surroundings. Some impeding, and then a crash with Albon in practice makes zero sense to me. I know I'm being harsh here, but I'd like Cadillac to remain without additional repair costs and penalties. The practice for Red Bull second driver Isaac Hadjar was very decent-ish. He completed just 1 lap less than Verstappen, but his pace was from slightly slower to much slower than Max. He then came out of nowhere on Saturday and outqualified his teammate and placed 8th. In the race, he got an okayish start, but quickly tumbled down the field, much thanks to the battle he had with Max. Overall, he had points ready to score, and yet it was the other Red Bull that brought home the goodies. In China, some drivers lost out because of pitting less than 60 seconds before a safety car. This time it was our championship favorite, George Russell. Normally, that wouldn't justify a third spot in the losers section, but the latte enjoyer got a little bit extra unlucky. Not only he lost out, but the one to benefit from his bad luck was his direct championship rival, Kimi Antonelli. Because of that, George is no longer the leader in the standings. In different circumstances, I'd say you can't really imagine a worse weekend than the one Alexander Albon was having. He hit the wall and later collided with Sergio Perez in FP1. He stopped on the track with an issue in FP2. He was the only Williams not to make it to Q2 and then had to nurture an issue in the race that cost him to pit not once, not twice, but 6 times. He finished dead last and a good minute behind Valtteri Bottas as well. Definitely a weekend to forget. But here come the different circumstances. Oliver Berman, ladies and gentlemen. Before the race, number 5 in the championship. And he never truly had pace this weekend. Sure, he got P9 in second practice, but nothing outside of it. He got shockingly knocked out of Q1 and had a horrible accident in the race. But he started P18, and at the time of the crash, he was still P18. Let's imagine that he clears Colapinto without any damage. With P17, you still don't get anything out of Japan. But, you know, the crash made it so much worse. Let's put the sad aside and focus on the wins. A small one, but a win nonetheless. Fernando Alonso witnessed the birth of his child and managed to finish a race. I know, not exactly a flashy victory, but you gotta measure each team with their own scale. Otherwise, I would never talk about anyone outside of the top 3 teams. Things changed rapidly for Haas. Last GP, Berman was at the top and Ocon at the very bottom. In Japan, the roles changed. It's Esti Besti who gets to hear some praises. He was comfortably the lead Haas the entire weekend, with the exception of FP2. This paid off in the form of his first points this season. Sadly, it is just one granted for 10th place, but it's a start. Funnily enough, it's a start for Oscar Piastri as well, a first one this season. And with all due respect to Lando, it is Oscar that's showcasing the true possibilities of that McLaren. I would love to place him a bit higher, but he was also one of the unluckier drivers, completely screwed by the safety car. It's very possible that an easy win was taken away from him, so that probably stings. Still, he finished as a runner-up, so I'd say it's a successful weekend for someone who haven't started a race yet. Someone definitely deserving a praise is Charles Leclerc. The Monegasque had to fight tooth and nail with not only his teammate, but also both Mercedes cars at some point during this race. And in almost all of those fights, he was a winner. He really did outperform other drivers, and that's worth remembering, so a trophy for a third spot is definitely deserved. Willy Wonka's golden ticket was a pretty good metaphor, I think. Kimi Antonelli not only performed at the top level, but Lady Luck was on his side as well. Being the second Mercedes turned out to be beneficial for once. He wasn't exactly gifted a win, as he still had to fend off Piastri for half the race, but I'm gonna argue that should a safety car appear a lap or 2 later, Antonelli would lose out just like Russell. And I guess that's it. With Bahrain and Saudi Arabia not on the calendar anymore, it's 2 sprints in a row, Miami and Canada, and I'm late for both of them. So now, I gotta go fix my schedule. See ya!